Thank you very much, Madam Vice President, Excellencies. It's a privilege for me to be here today and to participate in this biennial panel meeting for discussion of issues relevant to the impact of unilateral sanctions, means of the enforcement, and growing overcompliance to the right to food and food security. Today, the rapid expansion of various forms of unilateral sanctions is taking place in the face of intensive political debate with very little attention paid to their legality and humanitarian impact, especially as regards the right to food and food security. Reports received as well as country visits demonstrate that usually the whole population of the country under unilateral sanctions becomes subjected to the negative impact of them and also of overcompliance with the most vulnerable groups facing the most dramatic effects. Unilateral sanctions regimes are usually pretending to introduce humanitarian exceptions, to deliver in particular food as a survival good. At the same time, this allegation is generally misleading. Humanitarian exceptions are not effective. And additionally, as the G2 Zero Hunger aims to ensure not only food availability, but rather food sustainability, that is not possible when unilateral sanctions, means of their enforcement or implementation and overcompliance, affect access to water, electricity, transportation, gas, gasoline, infrastructure, and accessibility. Due to the limited time, it's not possible to address all elements of the impacts, but I will focus at least at some of them. In particular, unilateral sanctions, means of the enforcement and overcompliance, create impediments in delivery of food, seeds, agricultural machinery, spare parts, fertilizers, livestock vaccines, and many other, what has serious transborder effects, decreases the effectiveness of agriculture, and make people to come back to hard and low-effective hand food cultivation. Insufficiency of fuel due to sector and transportation sanctions affects agricultural machinery, food processing and storage, delivery of food to remote areas. Multiplying costs of food and goods necessary for agriculture, transportation costs make it unaffordable for the most vulnerable groups, and in some countries for the majority of population. All the above results in the growing poverty rates, unavailability of food basket, reduced ratio, unavailability of the proper nutrition. Impediments in access to the newest knowledge prevent countries from developing of more effective agriculture and often make them to use old, often environmentally unfriendly agricultural technologies, resulting in the deteriorating labor environment, violating inter alia the right of everyone to benefit from the results of academic progress. Unavailability of stock vaccination undermines plant and livestock disease prevention capacities. Reduced access to clean water and sanitation, transportation, use of sewage for irrigation purposes increases risk of waterborne diseases. Sanctions imposed against fertilizers industry have deteriorating effect over the population of the countries in many parts of the world, especially those which already face hunger elimination problems due to multiplied costs of fertilizers, risks of punishment for circumvention of sanctions regime, or their absolute unavailability. Even the delivery of food as such, which is claimed by sanctioning states as being fully exempted from any limitations, is usually very problematic and very expensive, due to the transportation, financial, insurance sanctions, as well as fear of food producers to get subjected to penalties in the face of unclear sanctions regimes and possibility of extremely severe punishments. The same reasons impede the implementation of the UN Security Council humanitarian resolutions requesting to release frozen assets to ensure basic needs of the population and to deliver food. Madam Vice President, Excellencies, the above reasons increase moderate and severe malnutrition and hunger, result in unbalanced food baskets and insufficiency of proteins and vitamins, violate fundamental human rights under the ICCPR, including the right to life, right to decent life, freedom from torture, prohibition of discrimination with growing mortality rates and reduced life expectancy. Freedom from hunger and right to the highest attainable level of health under many human rights treaties is violated, as food is one of the fundamental prerequisites for implementation of the right to health. It severely affects vulnerable groups, children due to unavailability of baby formula, people dependent on health-related diets, women as they sacrifice food on behalf of men and children, and in the environment of insufficiency of nutrition are most subjected to the home violence. They increase the level of poverty and dependence on governmental support and humanitarian assistance, which is also reduced due to the general economic impact of unilateral sanctions. Poverty and hunger are viewed by the UN General Assembly as conditions conducive to terrorism and other types of transboundary crimes, as well as involvement into grey economy. Madam Vice President, Excellencies, right to food is a right vital for survival and living in dignity of every individual around the world every day. It cannot be postponed to the next year or even the next month. It consists of two parts: availability of food today and food sustainability in every country for every person. Due to the high importance of this right, no unilateral measures can be taken to affect the right to food both today and continuously. As the right to food and SDG 2 are directly dependent on the proper functioning of electricity, water supply, transportation, gas, and many other elements of infrastructure in the country, I request again to lift any measures which can negatively affect the functioning of critical infrastructure and goods necessary for agriculture and food sustainability. I also want to remind that states cannot justify negative impacts of unilateral sanctions as unintended due to overcompliance of private actors, as it is their obligation under international law not to violate human rights, as well as other international obligations, but also acting under the principle of due diligence to ensure that all actors acting under their jurisdiction and control do not violate human rights. I align here with the position of the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights that if the right to food is violated by the action of private actors, states on the territory of under jurisdiction of which these businesses are registered are equally responsible. I hope for fruitful discussion today. Thank you very much.